So in the previous problem sets that we've done, you have been allowed to round your final answers however you feel like rounding them with no given set rules. And what we're going to learn today is that there are some set rules when you're adding or subtracting. There's some rules when you're multiplying or dividing, and you will now round correctly. So let's start off with when you're adding or subtracting. You have to be careful because when you're adding or subtracting, you're going to be watching decimal places. So what you want to do is you want to line up these numbers. So when you line them up, you want to line up the decimal points. This is kind of like when you were in elementary school first learning how to add these together. But here's how this works. You're going to add them together like normal, and you would get this answer. And then you're going to go back and look at the numbers that you've been given and decide how many decimal places each one has. Now remember, decimal places are these numbers that are after the decimal place. So this one has 2 decimal places, this one has 1. Your answer can only have as many as the least of those numbers. So your answer can only have 1 decimal place, which would be this number. But you look at this number to tell you round up. So if this were your problem, we would all now round and report our answer as 44.8. Let's try another example. So remember, the first thing that you want to do is rewrite these to begin with while we're practicing so that the decimal places are lined up. And then you're going to add the numbers together. So this is a number you would have gotten before learning about Sig Figs. And so what you're going to do now is look at decimal places. So remember, you're looking at decimal places, and it's places after the decimal point. So this one has 4, this one has 2, this one has 0. And you always go with the lowest. So you don't want any decimal places after the decimal point. And then the 3 tells you to stay where you are. So we would all report this answer to be 157. So it's a little different when you're multiplying or dividing. When you're multiplying or dividing, you're going to be looking at significant digits. And so this goes back to the stuff that you took some notes on, and you have that worksheet in your folder about significant digits. So you have to be able to count significant digits when you're doing this. So you're going to go to each one of these numbers that you're given, and you're going to say how many Sig Figs are in each one. So pause the video because you have your rules to count significant digits and figure out how many Sig Figs each one of these numbers has and fill in the blanks. Go ahead and pause, fill it in, and then push play, and we'll keep on going. So the second one should have been easy. There are no zeros in that number, so therefore it's easy to tell. So for this one, that one is significant because it's not 0. This one is significant because it's to the left of to the right of the decimal place after a non-zero number. And then this one is in between. So this one also has 3. So when you're plugging this into your calculator, you get 484 on your calculator. And so then what you need to do is you need to count Sig Figs. Well, this one's easy. They're all not 0. So every number that isn't 0 automatically counts. This number has 3 Sig Figs, so you're good to go. Let's do one that's a little bit more complicated than this one. So let's look at this problem first. Remember, you're multiplying or dividing, so you're looking at Sig Figs. So you have to go to each number and say how many Sig Figs are in each one. So remember, every non-zero number counts. And then for zeros, it matters where they're placed. These are in the beginning, so they don't count. But this one is at the end after the decimal point, so it does count. So each one of these has 2. That means your answer needs 2. So then you plug it into your calculator. And your calculator gives you this as your answer. Remember, these zeros are in front, so they don't count. This 2 counts, and that 2 counts. So you have 2 Sig Figs in this answer. So this would be your answer. You could also write it in scientific notation, and that would look like 2.2 times 10 to the minus 6, if you wanted to do that. This or this, totally okay. So what I wanted to point out here is when you have scientific notation, it's this number that tells you how many Sig Figs. So there's 2 Sig Figs here because of those numbers. Okay? The exponent over here does not affect significant digits. All right, so that's a general explanation of how this works. Now go and try the problems on the worksheet.